without further ado, please welcome Erin Miles, What Teaching Has Taught Me.
This crowd is amazing, slightly intimidating, but amazing. So teaching has taught me a lot of things. For example, vacation breaks are not there for the students. They are in place to ensure the sanity and patience of teachers, which can sometimes wear dangerously threadbare. And no matter how hip or with it we think we are as we get older, there is always going to be a generation gap when it comes to slang. I still think the word rad is pretty rad, but it never ceases to elicit comments and chuckles from the peanut gallery in my classroom if I use it. But when it comes to the slang of my students, I'm often at a loss for the logic. I mean, really, what is the difference between a bay and a boo? And if something is cool, which side of the temperature spectrum is better, ice cold or straight fire? But the two lessons I really want to share with you are ones that have generated positive changes in my own perspective. The first one deals with our addiction to our devices. I'm pretty certain the majority of my students consider their cell phone to be a vital organ they might perish without. But honestly, most of us are so plugged in, we don't even realize how plugged in we've become. And while there are benefits to these technologies, they come with downfalls too. Our phones can prevent us from being 100% connected in the moment we are in or the people we are with. They can reduce our powers of memory and recall because the answers are just a Google away. But the biggest pitfall I see is that they are slowly making productive boredom a thing of the past. Remember the days when we couldn't distract ourselves from our boredom by crushing candies or mindlessly scrolling through somebody's Instagram or Facebook feed? It was up to us. We had to pull ourselves out of the throng of doldrum or just accept it and be bored. And when left to linger free of distraction, the mind can come up with some pretty amazing things. And when I started noticing these pitfalls, not in my students, but in myself, like any good science teacher, I did an experiment. I left my phone at home so I wouldn't have it with me during the day, and I was really disappointed at how often I would absentmindedly reach for it for no reason. So this summer, I went to Alaska for 2 weeks, and other than occasionally letting my parents and concerned friends know that I hadn't been eaten by a bear, my phone remained completely off. And it was the most refreshing thing that I have done in a long, long time. My mind wandered, ideas blossomed, I was present, and until that moment, I hadn't realized how out of touch with myself I'd become. And while abstaining from my phone wasn't a feasible thing to maintain when I returned to the real world, it did ignite in me a motivation to be less connected, which ironically has led to me feeling more connected to the things that matter. The second lesson that I have is the skewed way we look at getting older. It seems that when we're younger, we cannot wait for our next birthday. But then sometime when we reach our upper 20s, a good chunk of us want to stop getting older and actually look at it as something shameful. And I'm afraid we're unintentionally teaching kids that getting older is a bad thing. We tell them it's disrespectful to ask somebody their age, or they see somebody celebrating their 29th birthday for the 11th year in a row. And yeah, aging does come with fine lines and gray hair, and I'm pretty certain that my knees are the loudest thing in my yoga class. But it's up to us how we age, and as long as we're leading healthy, productive lives, ensuring that our time spent is not time wasted, then each birthday should be a celebration of us knowing more, knowing ourselves more, experiencing more, accomplishing more, being overall more awesome than we were the year before. We need to cast aside those arbitrary benchmarks dictating that we need to do certain things by a certain age, or that past a certain age it's too late to do others. Imagine how inspirational this perspective could be, motivating us to make the most of our time, rather than feeling stifled by some timeline or discouraged by a ticking clock. This perspective that it is merely up to ourselves to continue to get better as we inevitably get older is a perspective I think is pretty rad. So yes, while my job centers around me teaching things to my students, I am forever grateful for all the things that my students have taught me. Thank you, guys.